legalizing recreational marijuana and regulation of dispensaries. So you are seeing now people, employers, carriers being required to pay for the use of medical marijuana.
Really? That is certainly a development.
Welcome to The Defense Never Rests with Morgan and Akins, your monthly dose of uncommon sense about all things legal and some that are not.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of The Defense Never Rests. I'm Megan Henry, joined today by my co-host, Wendy Smith. Good morning, Wendy. How are you?
Good morning, Megan. How are you?
I'm great.
I see the palm trees behind you.
Yes, I am in beautiful Siesta Key, Florida at my mom's house for like 2.5 weeks. So it's been really nice. Taking vacation next week, but this week it's been a working week, but I can't
Still
complain.
very jealous.
Cannot complain. But we are here. You and I had discussed doing this, having kind of a like a workers' comp talk, every few weeks or so to talk about what's going on in the comp world for, our listeners and viewers who, that's their area and that's, your expertise. So today we brought on Audrey Alsop from Connor Strong, which is a brokerage headquartered in, I think they're in Camden, New Jersey now. But she, we're going to bring her in to talk about, the hot topics that are going in this post-COVID or almost post-COVID world. So with that, let's bring her in. Good morning, Audrey. So happy to have you this morning on The Defense Never Rests. And, we're here to talk about, I think this is the beginning of a regular series we hope to have with you and Wendy that we're going to talk about issues in workers' comp. But this is our first one. So our listeners may not know you yet. So, if you could just tell us, a little bit about you and, where you work and kind of what you do.
Sure. I work for a broker called Connor Strong and Buccaloo. We're a regional broker, really heavily based, client-based in the East Coast. Our states are Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, Maryland, Delaware. Our clients are based there, but they have satellite locations in many other jurisdictions. So we probably deal with about half the jurisdictions out there. I have two roles at Connor Strong and Buccaloo. One is claim consultant. I assist my clients on any of their claim needs. That could be claim reviews, interviewing a new TPA, setting up managed care agreements. And then the other piece of my role is workers' comp practice leader. I have about 25 years plus in workers' comp. And we try to look at what are the trends in workers' comp? What are the latest issues? On a global basis, what do our clients need help with? So one, for example, we just put together an ebook on back to the basics, helping them with low cost or no cost risk control ideas that impacts their total cost of risk. We're working on return to work programs. One of the biggest issues we spent time with in 2020 was obviously COVID and the pandemic, and could it have an impact in workers' comp? So very active in anything impacting workers' comp.
Do you really function as like a partner in your role at Connor Strong, which is an insurance brokerage? Do you really function as like a partner to your clients to kind of like hand step them through upcoming issues and kind of like evaluate risk before it hits them, so they can know what to expect?
Yes, that's a good point. Having conversations with many of my clients this year as far as what internal changes in your business could impact your workers' comp trends. So clients are having employees return to the office. Classrooms will be opening up later this year. So will that increase frequency of claims or severity of claims? There could be new case law coming out that could impact frequency and severity of claims. So yes, we do that also.
And that kind of just brings us right into, what we're here to talk about today. I mean, we are like pretty much a year here in a few weeks into this COVID pandemic. And, I imagine the last year, there was a lot of changes, to the comp industry. I'm not just gonna
That's an
call it
understatement.
yeah. Well, yeah. So, and you guys are like kind of the experts on this. So, I mean, before we get to what's coming next, I mean, what was this year like? I mean, and Wendy, I'll throw it to you first, but what was this year like, in your world?
So surprisingly, actually, maybe not surprisingly now as we're sitting here today, we anticipated what COVID claims would come in, how that would look like, how would we be dealing with, because the law just kept changing and it still keeps changing. I mean, right now we're March 30th and there is a big change that's going to happen starting on April 1st with the American Rescue Plan Act and how that affects the, families first coronavirus, the Response Act and all those kinds of things. So that's a little bit like on the employer side, but that does affect workers' comp. But then when you start recapping now a day in the life of what COVID started with and now where we're at, you don't, except for California, I always say California is the outlier. The claims that you see are not as high as you think they are.
Really?
With respect to COVID. Now, with respect to other claims, falls at work, injuries and things like that, that in my world, depending on the industry that you're in and whether or not COVID affected the workforce there, you didn't see that much of a change.
Okay, that surprises me because I would think you'd see almost a drop in some comp claims because people weren't at their offices as much or at their places of employment as much. I mean, I know it's not the same, not across all industries. Of course, there's a lot of essential workers that we all really relied on over the last year. But I guess my gut would say, oh, there would probably be a drop in claims, but that was not the case.
No, and it's interesting because as the laws started to change and they started to change rapidly, you look at states that have, just in New Jersey, which is your state, Megan, they have the presumption piece to it. So, if you're an essential worker or whatever, you get that benefit of presumption, which makes it then the burden puts on the defense. But then you have states like Pennsylvania where there is really no law on point. And just recently, there was actually the first case in Pennsylvania decided on a COVID claim, and it was in the benefit of the defense, the employer. And it really turned on credibility issues as to how the person contracted the virus.
Okay. And what are you seeing on your end from the broker side, Audrey?
Yeah, Wendy brings up some really good points. So many of our clients address the COVID claims through healthcare. Some of them would pay for the testing, give time out for the quarantine. And we did see a drop in the non-COVID claims because people were working from home. Interesting, if you take something like auto accidents, where there was a major drop in frequency of auto accidents, work-related auto accidents, but there was an increase in severity because with less people on the roads, many people were speeding and getting into more severe accidents.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we saw there.
That's interesting.
It is interesting. Yeah, I wouldn't think so, but I did hear reports of speeding, and now we're seeing some of those claims reported. And then as far as COVID, Wendy brought up some great points about New Jersey and Pennsylvania, two states right next to each other. Many of the COVID claims in Pennsylvania were denied. Minimal was paid. But in New Jersey, with the change in the presumption law in September, and the essential worker and the great list of who is an essential worker was created, there was an uptick in essential worker COVID claims. The average paid on those claims without hospitalization is actually very low. With hospitalization, I think it could be averaging maybe about $85,000. Then, of course, there are those severe cases where people had extended hospitalizations, fatalities, and comorbidity impacts.
It's
So
interesting you say about the auto accidents, whatever, because I will say
Mhm.
this, the first time after you've been in lockdown, you haven't gone anywhere, and you get out, especially somebody like me I moved outside of the city. So the first time you get to I-95 and you see there is nobody out there, it's a very
Yeah.
strange feeling. Kind of want to put your foot a little harder on that gas pedal
yeah,
there.
it's a little Walking
It's so
Dead-ish.
true.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Um, and and I'm going to throw this to you, Wendy, though. But can you explain a little bit to someone like me who doesn't understand the ins and outs of comp? What is the change in the presumption law that you both just referred to it? And can you explain that a little bit to me?
How long is this podcast again?
Give,
No.
give me the like Cliff Notes version.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
So when you think about any type of, think about a lawsuit basically, and who has the burden. So, even in like a GL context, the plaintiff brings forward the suit. They have the burden to prove that they sustained an injury or some kind of harm caused by the defendant. So here in comp, the way you look at it is that if the person brings forth a claim petition, workers' comp works a little differently because I always say it's like the open door, closed door effect. To open the door means, did you accept there was a work injury? If you did, how on our end, on the defense end, how soon can you close the door?
Mhm.
So a claimant, we call them claimants sometimes in New Jersey, they call them petitioners. There's various terms, but the employee brings forward a claim and it's their burden to prove that they sustained a work-related injury. With the presumption that comes in, it flips it. So it's almost
Okay.
like you have an affirmative defense, like it puts the burden on the defendant to prove you didn't get COVID at work.
And this was a big change.
It was it was a rapid change, and
Okay.
not everyone thought through how the law would how this would all play out, and it's created problems on how you deal with certain claims as well.
So that's interesting because that, I just the way I look at COVID, I mean, I know we have all this contact tracing, but especially, at the very beginning and into the summer, I would see we didn't know a lot of what we know now of how it spreads, and we thought it spread. It still spreads very rapidly, but I think we thought it was much worse than it is. So I could see that being, kind of difficult with that presumption almost being there when someone could be anywhere and really get it, and you don't know what your employee's doing outside of work. I mean, they could have gone to the grocery store and gotten it there. I see that being a big challenge. But is it that as much of a challenge as I'm seeing it as?
Yes, and it's also how the claims are brought into. And
Okay.
again, like I know we're going to talk about hot topics because believe
Mhm.
me, even with COVID, there are things that still are coming out here left and right in the law that have nothing to do with COVID. But it's how a person brings the injury too. There's always the occupational disease versus a specific injury. It's versus, did somebody on this day come to work and they stood next to somebody with no mask on, no nothing, and they definitely got COVID from that person. It was a specific incident. Or is it just by the nature of their job, the hazard, the buzzword is always the hazard of the occupation that made them exposed to COVID. So there's those nuances that come about with that too.
Yeah. And it's interesting, as I'm sitting here in Florida right now, and the COVID's not happening here. I don't know if you knew. It's like it doesn't exist.
I don't leave my house, so I have no idea.
No, it's a whole other world. I was like, okay, this is a little different.
And we actually have clients that maybe they go to Florida for the winter, and same thing. I mean, unfortunately, some of them have contracted COVID, but it is different in different states.
Yeah, very, very different, and
Yeah.
how it's. So, we had mentioned hot topics. So let's just jump into, the hot topics, and I'm gonna, just throw it out there. I mean, I guess a year ago the hot topic was COVID. Okay, so what's our hot topic? What are we talking about now?
It still is, but there's something that actually, this will come on the heels of COVID. So even before COVID started, a lot of advancement in technology really was changing the way. I mean, think about what we're doing at work from home. I would say that happened before COVID. People were doing that hoteling, people didn't want to pay for more office space. So now you're seeing that now people are working at home, but advancement in technology is definitely one. And COVID really brought this to light with the virtual medical treatment.
Okay.
And how, how you're treating claims in workers' comp now, because there's two sides to it. From the employee side of it, somebody gets hurt at work, could be hard to get to appointments, how they're getting to appointments. Now, you have it. You can there's telemedicine access all over the place. As long as you have something called a smartphone, excuse my screen. I hope everybody really sees that. My niece changed that.
What is it? I want to know.
I don't know. It's some kind of animated, looks kind of like a koala type bear, but anyway, so you started, you have that telemedicine aspect now. They could get treatment at their fingertips from home in their pajamas. They don't have to go out.
But how effective do you think the telemedicine treatment is? I see it very good as a good screening to be like, okay, I have an idea. A good idea. I think these doctors are very smart individuals, but there is something different about actually going into a doctor's office and seeing them face to face and having them actually evaluate you. And especially like when in comp, if someone's getting like occupational therapy, are they able to do that remotely?
Yeah. And Wendy brought up some great points about changes in technology. So a lot of carriers and TPAs offered, they tried to implement telemedicine and something else called nurse triage, where with COVID, it seemed that more clients were grasping these concepts and utilizing this technology. So nurse triage is a great service where when a claim's reported, it's telephonic, they talk to a nurse, they discuss their injuries, and the nurse sets the expectation and can advise treatment. This way, it helps reduce maybe reporting of those claims, frequency of claims, also reduces severity. Then more clients also embrace telemedicine, which in the beginning, it's a slow learn, and then it takes a while to figure out what's the best type of claims. With COVID, we actually saw an increase of mental health. So with that potential psych claim, stress, anxiety, and depression that could come from workers' comp, maybe it came from being in-house. Those are great. That's a great tool to utilize to help keep the treatment going, the employees in their own home, so they feel more comfortable having those conversations. Also with broker tech, we had looked at some companies that where they could be mailed a physical therapy modality. And with utilizing smartphones, video, physical therapy modalities, talking to a physical therapist via Zoom, they could actually keep that treatment going. So that's a good thing in this world.
Then there's the bad part to it. That's why I said there's a flip side to it. It's that now you can't get the person to the doctors. Now they are, it's like the same treatment over and over again. Like you read the same note and it looks the same. It's the same exact verbiage that you just saw on the last 6 notes, because the person's going to their virtual treatment 3 times a week. It's getting charged X amount. And I want you to physically go see a doctor. Now, how do you get them out of the house? How do you get to the person to a physical doctor? And I think as the world started opening up a little bit, it's a lot easier to now have people go back in person in some aspect if the case warrants it. But from a cost perspective, I would think that, you just wrote an ebook on cost, Audrey. That's been a big trend happening in comp. And I think it's just like developed like crazy with COVID coming in. about watching costs because, those appointments get expensive. In New York,
Yeah.
you sometimes have to pay
Yep.
to get them to their doctors.
Yeah.
You have to reimburse them their travel there, 3 times a week.
Yes.
And getting from like Queens to, Manhattan, whatever, you'd think that's just, hop on the subway, it's real quick. That could take an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I even see it from, with the technology from, from the general litigation perspective, cutting down on the cost of having to attend like court appearances that can easily be done, virtually rather than having to be in person. And I know for Wendy, like you've been doing virtual hearings for years. I don't know why it took so long for GL to get caught up to that, but to not have to, using New York as an example, to not have to travel to Queens for, a 2-minute calendar call, it saves clients a ton of money, why not be able to do it virtually? You can just do it quickly and it'll be just as effective. You get the same result,
And the word out is, like I said, like in some jurisdictions, they had been doing it. There was a
Mhm.
virtual hearing aspect, and now you move forward after COVID where we're all virtual. And the word out on the street is that there is going to be some aspect of virtual, court or some type of procedure going forward, even after this pandemic is long gone.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that is a definite positive, development if we're going to evaluate things. I think it's a positive look. So, and in addition to the technology advances, what else are we seeing that's a hot topic?
Drugs. I always love talking about that.
Yeah.
You had everybody all hyped up on the opioid crisis and
Yeah.
everything before, and that it's still out there, but now you've
Mhm.
got the wonderful world of, legalizing recreational marijuana and regulation of dispensaries. So you are seeing now people, employers, carriers being required to pay for the use of medical marijuana.
Really? That is certainly a development.
Case, I just actually did a whole post about, because it was right on the heels of the New York Times just came out with an article last Friday about New York looking to, they've been trying to do this, but apparently they've come to some type of agreement to get this legislation moving on legalizing recreational use of marijuana. There was a case in the end of February that came out in New York, comp case, where the court required the carrier to reimburse an injured police officer his medical marijuana prescriptions.
Wow. So what is the impact though of the legalization of marijuana when you have like, can employers then still have, like, say someone has even they use marijuana to help them with whatever ailment they have, can an employer then come and say, yeah, but not while you're working if they need it for a medical reason?
It just
Okay.
depends on the type of job. I
Mhm.
know Department
Right.
of Transportation.
Probably not a good place to do
DOT
that.
Yeah, DOT. Yeah, I think if it impacts the safety of the job, then they're still precluded from, taking certain type of medications. That's definitely, if employers have questions out there, that's definitely a question for the loss control representative, risk control. I know they're looking at the positive aspect of legalizing medical marijuana, where they can obtain more federal grants to do research to see what else can it help. Certain type of non-occupational diseases, hereditary diseases that they're thinking it can help with.
I was just gonna say though, like the thing of it is that, and I tell employers is that it's still illegal on the federal end.
Mm-hmm.
There is, and it doesn't look like that's going to change in the near future. Right now, I mean, who knows? In 2 months, it could change. I mean, that's the way these things are working right now. And one of the things like this recent case pointed out that was interesting is like, the employer's not manufacturing the drug, they're not distributing it, you know, they are just being asked to pay for it. But on the flip side of this, I said, okay, so then are they immune from an employer immune? So if the person goes back to work, they still need the medical marijuana, which is a lot cheaper often than some of the other modalities of treatment. And then they get in a car accident.
Right.
While they're injured at work, there's going to be a comp claim, but there's going to be somebody suing them because they injured somebody.
Right.
Now, is the plaintiff or somebody who's going to bring the lawsuit, can they still raise that issue? And I said something like almost like the seatbelt safety rule, you know, in many states like Pennsylvania, it's illegal to not wear your seatbelt. That's been in place for many years. Car accident case I had, it was fatal. The person would have not died had they been wearing their seatbelt. We're barred, as from the defense bar, we were barred from bringing that into that fact into the case. You know, and I think about that line of thinking, you know,
Right.
when I think about medical marijuana here, you know, now are you going to, the flip side of it is, can you say that person was, you know, high as a kite when that happened?
It's going to be a big fight because, you know, it's going to be a big fight, and it's going to open up a lot of Pandora's box to, you know, kind of dig into things that counsel may not want you to dig into, but you might be able to, you know, and it's the same thing, you know, looking into like mental health backgrounds and stuff. I mean, it's going to be a Pandora's box. At least that's how I see it. Because I can see it running down that same road that you're talking about with the seatbelts, Wendy. What about, you know, we saw a lot of this kind of explode during the pandemic. It was already hot, but it really got hotter, as the gig economy and, you know, gig employees. I mean, I don't know. I probably wouldn't have survived this year without Instacart. You know, it's really helped me get my groceries. But what are you seeing, you know, the future there for gig economy?
It's going to continue.
Yeah.
I mean, there's several hot cases that are pending, even in the appellate level areas in multiple jurisdictions, as to whether or not, you know, there's still the argument as to whether somebody is an independent contractor versus an employee. I mean, that fight has always been there. It's not going away, but how does one, and it always goes on the control of the employer. So you've got now, you just said it, using Instacart, Amazon. Think about all the Amazon increase with COVID, you know, even more so than before. Everybody's ordering from there. They started contracting out other drivers because you can't, they didn't have enough manpower.
Yeah, perfect example. We've, with less people eating out during COVID and more people go in the grocery store, or at least ordering from the grocery store, we've seen an uptick in our logistics clients. And again, if they don't have that employee population, then they're contracting out. Some of those independent contractors have insurance, some don't.
And also, like, a lot of them work for several outfits. I mean, you have the, you know, the Instacart person's also doing DoorDash, and, you know, they're, you know, when they're also, you know, Uber Eats, who knows? But, and so how do you deal with that on the comp end? I mean, say they're making 3 different deliveries under 3 different apps at the same time. Is it really, you're just looking at the control that entity has over them?
That can weigh against them depending on, you know, whether they have to, how they can accept jobs, how they're getting the jobs, how they're getting the training. They're using their own car. They have to be responsible to keep their insurance, their driver's license involved. On the other end of it, you could argue, I mean, this is what we do in the legal world. It's that if somebody was to say, well, at that time he was driving for Uber, and he was, you know, even though sometimes they drive for Instacart or, you know, Amazon, this time it was Uber, and you could show that they were doing different jobs. Maybe that's, if I'm representing Uber,
That's
maybe
helpful.
you're not my employee. Maybe you are Instacart's employee for the day, you know, or you're somebody else. So again, it would all turn on the facts, but you are seeing cases right now in comp, especially like again, like the Amazon driver. If you look at how Amazon's operation runs, they don't really pass the test that they are an independent driver, that there is no control. I mean, they have to go to the hub to go get their deliveries. They're trained by Amazon. They're used.
Right.
I mean, some of them were using other trucks at the time, but now I'm seeing more of the Amazon trucks come back.
I see a lot of them pull up in a shady car, and I'm like, who's at my house? And it's like, oh no, it's just your deodorant. So I would see that's a little more difficult to prove that they're like an employee versus like the driver coming up in the actual marked Amazon truck. But that's a good point. They're going to the same place to pick everything up, and they're getting trained. It's just they're not in an Amazon vehicle.
Yeah, there's a multiple tests as to why, and the court sort of seems to be leading, in favor of the worker, in making these analysis. There's always like these fine lines. Like I always say, it's like, we keep seeing the parking lot cases. Just when you think that the law has defined about course and scope, if you're injured in a parking lot, when, how, whatever, a new case comes out, new law happens, and new arguments come about. So that gig economy is going to be here for a while.
And I mean, from my perspective, I just see it being here for a while because you've seen such a downtick in employment in certain industries. It's very easy, or it seems much easier to be able to pick up a gig economy job and also juggle multiple of them to make a living. And people are using it out of convenience. I mean, I use it way more than I'd like to admit to, out of convenience. Now, Audrey, what are you seeing on the broker end, for, I'm sure you have some, gig economy clients, what are you seeing on your end from them?
Well, one thing we talked about was the increase in frequency and severity of claims. More analysis of looking at, is that an actual employee? Was there a contract between the employer and the temporary agency? Was there an alternative employer endorsement in that contract? How was the contract written? We actually did, Connor Strong and Bucklew actually did a seminar this fall on temporary staffing agencies and how poorly written contracts can impact our clients. So that's something we actively work with our clients on with that type. You really want to look at the severity of the injury. Unfortunately, we don't like to talk about age, but age impacts that workforce. Sometimes it's an older workforce, they've retired from a job, or, they've been let go, they can't get a job. And if they're in an injury, it could be, a more severe injury to that person. They could have additional comorbidities or, pre-existing issues. So that's something that we're seeing an increase. Yeah. So it'd be interesting to see what Wendy's seeing on her side.
Yeah, again, you say like this, I think you point out a good thought there with regards to the severity of injury. I mean, that really does something, like you see somebody who, let's just say, I mean, it is in a horrible accident, severe injuries, may not be able to walk again or something like that. That's when, you might see some turn on some of the how the cases are decided. Other thing is, you just brought up a point about the contracts. I've had people who've presented contracts that say on the top, you are like independent contractor agreement. And they think that does it. They're not, the person who signs that agreement, agrees to that, you're not an employee. And then I've had claims that have been brought against that. And it's like, no, that's not what makes them an independent contractor. That's not what sets them apart. And you have to again go through that test about how much control the employer has over that individual.
And are you seeing that sort of situation with like, I guess like, I don't want to call it smaller, but, you know, but smaller businesses or who might not be like have maybe a legal team or a general counsel or someone on their, in their corner to be like, no, like just writing that at the top's not really going to do it for you. Or is it just like across the board you're seeing it? Like, where do you see it more?
You see it both. I mean, right now, the hot thing with the gig economy is the big companies.
Yeah.
Especially give it like, we're saying, what's the hot topics, with this from this COVID pandemic. I mean, that's one of them because the deliveries have increased so much.
Yeah.
I would
But, yeah.
agree. I have a client that, maybe they're used to hiring 30 drivers, and then with an increase, given what's going on, now they need 50 drivers. And the staffing agency they're used to using maybe not have that number of drivers. So then they're going to their resources. And again, it's a staffing agency hiring people from another staffing agency. So now you have multiple staffing agreements. And unfortunately, some people say they have insurance and they don't have insurance.
Yeah. So one thing I've been curious about throughout this whole pandemic is, since we have, all these kids in virtual school, and I'm like, I mean, at the beginning, a lot of the teachers are teaching at home. I think a lot of them are in the classroom, but I think about it more for the teachers that are teaching from home. I mean, what does the comp claim look like if, Mrs. Thomas is teaching from her living room, and trips over, a cord from her computer that's a school property's computer while she's teaching her class. I mean, I imagine you're seeing those types of claims no?
No, and I also say go check your home policy. Absolutely, go check your homeowners. I'm not even kidding. I said that when people were talking about work from home and like, what's that going to look like from the comp sector? Because I also do, Megan knows I deal with employment as well.
Yeah.
There's different things that happen here, and I'm like, for one, I'd go and check my home policy to see what happens. But if you're doing laundry, is that, and the buzzer goes off of the dryer, and you just finished virtual course, so you're going to run down and go get that laundry out of there. Is that now what's going to be called, a deviation from your employment, or, a minor deviation, just like if you were going out and, taking a smoke break at work and you get hurt, because that sometimes the cases turn that's just a minor deviation from your work, from your employment.
Yeah. But what if it happens, like, I go back to this teaching scenario, like while you're you're teaching your class and you like trip over, like, again, the cord to your school-owned laptop or whatever, what a computer, I could see there's a potential claim there.
It could be.
Yeah.
They could bring a comp claim, and then again, you have to do the whole test, the evaluation, and also when you think about how they're injured, okay, you're teaching, you have this setup, are people checking like the safety of their home offices? No employer's doing that. My employer's not coming to my house to make sure my setup is safe around here. So it's kind of like, when you thought about this whole, like at the beginning of the pandemic, there was just this fear that we're going to be all these cases coming and everybody's panicked. And you're not seeing that, as much as you thought would happen. I think that's going to be the same way with like these home office things. Yeah. But it only takes one case. I'll tell you, it really does take one case comes out, and it's like that sets precedent for other things.
Yeah.
Again, don't be that test case.
I'm not.
being at your mom's home in Florida doing work, I don't think so.
we have the witnesses now. But, this is something that, like a brokerage, like our brokerage, we have a loss control department, and then some carriers have loss control, risk control. So during the pandemic, they put together a lot of ergonomic videos that help people with, well, if you're working from home, this is really how your home office should be set up as far as your desk, your chair, We sent reminders as far as safety protocols, making sure walkways were clear. Did it help? We hope it helped.
Yeah.
Sometimes with those work from home injuries, another trend is you'll see a delay in reporting because if someone doesn't have a proper workstation set up, that may take a while for the wrist, their back to start hurting. And then they look at that, well, was that something from a pre-existing problem? Was that something because I run every day? Or was that because I'm working from home and I'm sitting in this chair and that's what caused it?
Yeah. I mean, and that's a really I like that you brought that up there because that's a really nice like resource I think to provide to clients.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean a lot of us came into this not equipped to work from home. I was working from home, 4 days a week already, but that wasn't the norm, I think. So that's a really nice I think perk.
Yeah.
And I mean,
And
from a risk
yeah.
prevention, it's smart,
Mhm.
but also I'm sure your clients appreciated it as well.
Yeah. And then like what you said with not only are the parent, it could be two parents working from home, but the kids are doing school from home. So you can't have a perfect setup everywhere. So, you hear about people having their home office in the attic because that's the only free space, or the garage. What happens when the weather changes? So
I still could use someone to come up and hook up my printer.
Or if you're sitting outside in the nice weather and you get bit by, some strange Floridian bug.
I know. Well, yeah, there's been a few things flying around here. So, there's just a school of ducks and I was like, okay, can you stay over there? So, we're about at the end of our time, but is there anything else that you two see that that we haven't talked about that, you kind of see as like a hot topic, that's something that we're going to be hearing more about as we progress into this hopefully post-COVID world?
I think the comorbidity issue and the permanency issue of COVID,
Sure.
if somebody contacted COVID, it was the state, maybe they're an essential employee, was covered by workers' comp. And now people are saying, well, people are back at work and they still have breathing issues, respiratory issues, heart issues. I met with my accountant the other day and she contacted COVID. Now it's been 6 months later and she's got to go back to the hospital to deal with a heart issue. So is that going to create a permanency or permanent impairment issue for work?
And that's such a great point too, because one thing I've seen is how differently it affects each individual, and the studies on it are so new, and we just don't know. So the permanency of it is going to vary so greatly from person to person, and we just don't have all the knowledge yet. I mean, the really smart scientists out there are working on it, but I think we're far from the end. So I think that's a really good point.
And Audrey just touched on something similar to what I was going to say, but talk about the vaccinations.
Oh yeah.
And what the vaccinations are going to do. Just from an employment side, you look at like whether they're going to require people, employers going to require people to get vaccinations. Well, maybe so, maybe not. But now you've got to look at, again, I always like the interplay of different laws, like what the American Rescue Plan is going to do. Well, it expands leave time for people who get the vaccination, have side effects from the vaccination. Okay, so that covers that. But what if there's long-term issues with regards to the vaccinations going forward? We don't know that. And that's to say, you can only anticipate certain things like we did at the beginning of COVID, but we still don't know.
Sure. And there's lots of people I know that really don't want to get it because they're concerned about what the long-term effects would be, because it hasn't been studied as long as, other vaccines out there. So
I want their spot.
I know.
You could probably take it. I don't know at this point. Well, guys, thanks so much for joining me this morning. I think I am really looking forward to us, like, keeping up with our comp talk, and hoping that you guys can, teach me a little bit more and enlighten me. So thanks so much, Audrey, for coming on today, and Wendy for joining me again. Wendy joined me a bunch of times, but and I hope to have you come back soon. But before we sign off, Audrey, why don't you let everyone know where they can find you, and if they need to find you.
Oh, sure. Thank you. I appreciate that. Sure. I work for Connor Strong and Buckalew. We're actually headquartered in Camden, New Jersey. They can just check out our website, Connor Strong, right on the website. They can email me at AALL, S as in Sam, OPP as in Paul, at connorstrong.com. And they can reach out to me at 502-640-5322. Would love to talk to, any prospects about how Connor Strong can help them with, any of their insurance needs or claim needs. Thank you.
That's great. And I can attest that Audrey is a delight to talk to, so they should contact you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Audrey.
Thanks so much.
Thank you both. This is a great conversation. Look forward to the next one.
Yes, me as well.